A little question there.
Yeah, there it is. Here we go. Good evening and welcome. It's the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. With you as always, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, Soren Petro with you. Much to get to tonight. Better matchup for the Chiefs. Did they get it with the Jags, or with the Chargers have been an easier path for the Chiefs? What about the Jags? Should scare the Chiefs. How does the first game affect this game? What can we take away from it? Who has better talent? Andy Reid on a bye week. Why is he so special? And MVP hasn't won the Super Bowl since '99. Mahomes is supposed to win the MVP. Is he supposed to win the Super Bowl? Chiefs are pretty good in close games. 4 out of their last 5 wins. 4 out of the last 5 they've won in one-score games. Is the kicking game fixed? Are the young players ready for the playoffs? Does Doug Peterson have an advantage having coached for Andy Reid? Who wins this game? We get to it all right now on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
This is the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric is the senior VP of Research and Development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro is the host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
That is right. It's the playoff edition here of Red, Gold, and Bold. And, gentlemen, the Chiefs are finally ready to play. They got the bye week. It's time to get on the field. It's time to make things happen. The question is, can they make it happen? Did they get the best matchup? Jeff, I'm kind of intrigued to hear this from you. I'm not really sure where you're going to go. I think this is the better matchup, but do you think they got the better end of the deal, not having to play the Los Angeles Chargers in this round?
Yeah, they got the better matchup. You know, I mean, I thought all along that if the Chargers came to Arrowhead, great chance of winning, just because they know each other well. They played each other. They played the Chiefs tough. The Jaguars are a different type of team. I respect them a lot more for what they've done over the last couple of months. You know, it's not just this comeback win, but comeback win against the Ravens. They played the Titans tough in that final and, you know, were able to overcome a slow start. I just don't think they match up as well with the Chiefs. And I think it's just – and maybe I'm a little biased because of the way the last game went. And I realize that was, God, whatever it was, 8-9 weeks ago now, and that they were in the middle of their lowest of lows. I think they were 3-7 when they came out of that. But young team on the road, the way they played against the Chargers in the first half, I don't write that completely off because of how they finished that game. I think they can still be a team that can get rattled a little bit and have moments where they just aren't ready for the big stage. Maybe that goes away now that they've had this win, but I think emotionally, that takes a lot to do what they did. I think you saw some flaws there. And I really believe that to beat the Chiefs in the postseason, you got to have some significant star power. And I don't see a lot of star power. I see some good players, but I don't see a Jamar Chase over there or Stephon Diggs, you know, someone in that area who can really dictate what the Chiefs do defensively. So, yeah, I think they got the best matchup they could have out of those two teams.
Eric, I mean, I think you're going to say they got the better matchup, but then again, you've not liked Justin Herbert. You have not liked the Chargers. You've called them frauds all along. Would they have been better getting the frauds on the field?
No, no. The Chargers were 2.5-point favorites on the road for a reason. They are. Like, if you run that game back a million times, they probably win 55 of them. So that, 55% of them, 55 of them. Maybe Herbert wins 55 of them. But I think that, they get a better matchup here, right? This is I talk about teams, sort of peaking early. I think I said a couple weeks ago that I think the Bills and the Bengals are unfortunately gonna run out of gas after this week when they play each other after playing 4 quarters this week, playing really hard down the stretch. And I think the Jags are in the same way, right? As Jeff said, they started 2-6. When they left Arrowhead, they went to 3-7. They got killed by Detroit to go to, I think, 4-8, and then they've won ever since. Like, I think at some point you're going to run out of gas, and the Chiefs really matched up really well with them in the first matchup. Jerick McKinnon was really good against both Foye Oluokun and Devin Lloyd. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, I know you have not, and I think rightfully have labeled a disappointment this year. He had his best game against the Jaguars, a touchdown and a one-handed catch down the sideline. Smith-Schuster was on his way to having a great game before he got concussed. Like, I think that they match up okay here. They turned the ball over, 3 times and still covered the number in that game, by the way. So I think that, it bodes well for Kansas City this weekend.
Yeah, I think it does. And I think it's the best game. And I think Jeff's rebooting his computer, because somebody was the question was, has Jeff fallen asleep? And I think he was frozen. And so he's rebooting his computer, and he'll join us back here in a minute. But, I think the Jags are the easier one to go with, or the easier team to play. I think the Chiefs really, there's some ways I look at that game and I go, okay, the Jags missed a couple of field goals. They didn't convert on the, on getting the fake punt. At least I don't think they did. I just watched that game again and I can't remember if they did or didn't. I know they didn't convert on when they put the, onside kick, right?
No, they converted the first onside kick.
No, they didn't. They got the kick, but they didn't convert for points.
They didn't. Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. They got the ball, but they didn't score on it.
And miraculously, they punted on 4th and 5 or 4th and 6 at the Chiefs 40-something and ended up punting it into the end zone. So I think, honestly, I do feel like the Jags can play better, but I think the Chiefs can play a lot better, right? I think that's the takeaway that I have from that game, is that they can play a lot better. They can have more success. They can not throw 3 interceptions. We saw against the Raiders that they can do a little bit better, not turning over the ball and being successful. I mean, I think, how much better do you feel about this team after the performance against the Raiders, Eric?
Yeah, I think that, I'm pretty up on the Chiefs right now. I think that we're, when we look at this team and when we look at the trajectory of this team, things have lined up really well for them. And, I know we're going to talk about MVP and all that stuff. They're favorites right now. It's still only 22%, but I feel really good about their chances. I really like the way they played. Jesus. I feel really good about how they played. And good thing my parents don't listen to this show.
They don't have to hear it. All they'd have to do is read it.
Yeah. Right. But I took the Lord's name in vain, Petro. That's my biggest problem.
Okay.
I just think they're in such a really good spot, and getting Jacksonville here. I know you talked about this on the show the other day, but they were favored to win the Super Bowl going into last week only because they had 1 fewer games than Buffalo. After how last week went, right, getting the Jags and then the Bills having to grind out a W against the Dolphins and the Bengals not looking all that well against the Ravens with Tyler Huntley, they are the favorite now, and they have the same number of games as everybody else does, including a possible neutral site game in Atlanta against Buffalo. So in my opinion, things are looking really up. I like the Raiders game was such a positive for them, but also just what has happened, and frankly, what has not happened to the Chiefs in the last week is such an important part to that handicap.
Yeah. Jeff, and Jeff joins us again here. If you're catching us on the podcast and the stream, people saw Jeff froze up there, but he's back now, ready to roll. And we were talking about how much the Raider game should have given confidence that they've got it on going. And Eric made the good point. the betting markets looked at what the Bills did or didn't do against the Dolphins, what the Bengals did or didn't do. And while we expected the Bills to become the favorite, they went and said, nah, you didn't look that impressive, right? Well, that's on down the road. That's for next week. Jaguars look pretty impressive, but I am kind of intrigued by how much you think the Jaguars are a real threat in this game for the Chiefs. Like any NFL team can beat any NFL team, but what about the Jags should be scaring Chiefs fans? What does Andy Reid, Steve Spagnuolo, Eric Bieniemy, what do they need to be? Dave Tobe, what do they need to be concerned with for this game?
Well, I think they have to be concerned with the way the Bengals were last year. They're a team that just does not go away, and I think that is a good quality to have when you're a young team. And sometimes they play like they don't understand the significance of the moment, and then they kind of figure it out along the way. I think that could be dangerous for you. There's no way they have the first half they have against the Chiefs and not end up getting blown out. I think that's obvious. But there is an element to them, and I think that starts with Doug Peterson, with the way he coaches them, that they do have a level of faith and a level of, I would call it almost like just ignorance about just what they're up against that can make them difficult. They force a lot of turnovers. I mean, that's the biggest thing I see, is that they're a team that in that 5-game win streak to end the regular season forced 11 turnovers. 2 of those turnovers led to game-winning plays, or it resulted in game-winning plays. And the Chiefs turned the ball over 3 times against them last time they played. And so that is something that I think would – the only way the Chiefs, I think, end up losing this game is if they get sloppy and they allow Jacksonville to capitalize on that sloppiness. And that certainly is not outside the realm of possibility with this team.
Yeah, I agree. They've been very sloppy all year. So the fact that they played one clean game doesn't erase all the sloppy games they had. I agree. And that is one of the things they're going to have to look for. But there is a difference. This isn't the same scenario as the Bengals. The Bengals won in the regular season. The Bengals came into this game, the AFC Championship game, with armed, knowing they could win. I guess the question would be, and I'll ask you, Eric, what scares you? What could potentially scare the Chiefs from the Jaguars? But did they do enough? Were they close enough that this game gives them confidence? Like, I get it that they're on a bit of a free roll, house money with the comeback. They certainly gained confidence with that. I think they're going to be a tougher opponent this time. Doesn't mean that the game's going to be as close, because the Chiefs can do a lot of things better than they did in that first game. But I am curious, how confident the Jaguars will be. How much does beating the Chargers? I think the whole league knows Chargers going to Charger is a joke that everybody enjoys in the league. How much does beating them really empower you to beat the Chiefs? And how much did that first game make them think that they were right there?
Well, the Chargers can make a dime out of a dollar bill, and the Chiefs can make a dollar bill out of a dime. So it's completely different. The Chargers have supposedly one of the generational quarterbacks in all of football, and somehow, average like 6 yards a pass attempt against a bad Chargers defense. With Trayvon Walker being like unproductive. I think it's completely different. We were talking we were talking about the game while it was happening, and I said the first half was all Jaguars and the second half was all Jaguars. Like the Chargers were bystanders in their own game, and Justin Herbert's a bystander in his own football life. He lets
it was all Jaguars in the first.
Correct.
Question?
Like you were down 27-0 because you threw 4 interceptions,
but those were pretty good plays by Asante. Let's give him that much, right?
True. It wasn't like but you got to put the ball in harm's way.
Eric. I know you tend to come out of front. You're not going to tell the defensive guy. Have we not been through the takeaways versus giveaways that we look at it?
Okay, well, I'm going to say that the Chargers offense was not the reason they were down 27-0. Correct?
Agreed.
That's fine.
Okay,
yeah.
So you have one team whose quarterback is almost as talented as Mahomes, but is a bystander in his own football life, and you have a quarterback in Patrick Mahomes, who's the MVP of the league, that is not only driving the car, but is the car himself. So I think it's completely different. Can the Jaguars beat the Chiefs? Absolutely. This game isn't even a 10-point spread, and I think a lot of that is giving a ton of credit to Doug Peterson, who is not as good of a play caller as Andy Reid, right? I was on my betting show with Rob Pizzola, and I said, you got to bet the ETN over rushes because that dude runs the ball in early downs no matter what the situation. The fact that ETN got like 20 carries in that game and they were down by 4 touchdowns at one point shows how committed Doug is to running the ball, which is not great. But Doug squeezes the juice out of the orange on 4th downs, 2-point conversions, penalties, and stuff like that. And that is something that Andy doesn't do as much. So there are things about the Jaguars that scare me as a Chiefs fan. So, do I think the Chiefs will win? Yes. Would I lay 8 points? Yes. Would I put them in a teaser at -2.5? Yes. But of course the Jags can beat them because, of a number of reasons, namely that they have a quarterback, frankly, who is the better quarterback, more talented quarterback in the game on Saturday.
Does the line move on it? Matt said, listen, the Chiefs are 9.5-point favorites in the first game. Line's pretty consistent. I've seen 8.
It's not though. So Matt, no, see, this is the problem. No, the Chiefs are coming off of a bye. And so the bye is worth about a point in the postseason. So this number has moved 2 points. So the difference in power rating between the Chiefs and the Jags has changed depending upon which book you look at. Pinnacle actually had the game at 8. And Pinnacle is one of the sharper books that there is. The bye is worth about a point in the playoffs. And so you're actually looking at, basically a power rating difference of 2 points, 2.5, depending upon which book you're looking at. So no, I actually think that the markets have moved towards Jacksonville since their first meeting.
Yeah. I agree. I think they have as well, but I don't think it's a lot. And I think that they haven't gone by the key number. Right? Like they haven't gone by 7. It's not down under 7. If it were under 7, I'd be worried. The fact that it's firmly over 7 says to me that they not only think the Chiefs are going to win, but they are hedging. Teasers don't even get you there, right? Like they still have the Chiefs winning even if you tease out 6 points. So I think the betting lines, yes, they may give the Jags a better chance this time around, but they don't think that the Jags are going to win this game, right? That's pretty clear. They're putting it beyond a score. At 8.5. At 8, it's a score when it's a 2-point conversion. So largely, they're not on it. So I do think there's still a lot of confidence betting-wise that the Chiefs are going to win this game. And I think also, isn't there built in, like, don't you think everyone is more on the Chargers or on the Jags after that game? Like, that's the one thing. There's usually the divisional round, you can usually catch some overreaction. And that gets baked in as well. And it's like, well, if the Jags don't throw those picks in the first half, I mean, they win this game going away. I mean, they're way better.
Is that my voice or is that whose voice is that?
That's the crappy bettor's voice, right? That's the guy that overreacts to and that doesn't see the big picture. And so I think that's one reason why I think there's a little bit of that baked back in. I think to Matt's point, we might be at about 9, right? Like it's 8 because of some of the overreaction that's going to come in. And playoff football does get more just general public money pouring in. One, there's only a handful of games. It's a standalone game, so everybody's betting this game.
Yeah.
So the handle's much bigger, and there's more hack players in it that can't factor. For
the public, here's the problem: the public doesn't affect betting lines, but public generally likes favorites. So there's 2 competing forces there. Like the Sharps do like Jacksonville relative to the previous weeks. Like that's the and frankly, the Chiefs were the worst team against the spread this year. Like I could very much see a game where the Chiefs are in control and win by 7 and you get your money if you bet Jacksonville, because the Chiefs are not a blow a team out game. I mean, the Raiders game was the anomaly, right? The Seattle game was the anomaly. We've seen Kansas City play down to teams like Jacksonville, to teams like Denver and things like that. That has been very much a part of their DNA this year.
I can also see every jackass headed with his fistful of dollars to the window to put it down on the fact that the Chiefs are the worst team against the spread. Like this is when all those things become known, and that's baked into the line as well. And so I mean, I get it. It's like, it comes down to who's better, right? I mean, Jeff, who's got more talent in this game?
I mean, the Chiefs. Well,
if you take the quarterback out, who has more talent?
The quarterback out. Yeah, I mean, they're pretty similar in that regard. I mean, they don't have a Chris Jones on Jacksonville. I think Chris Jones and Travis Kelce turned the table on Jacksonville, but Jacksonville's got some good young talent. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say they don't. I think what's scary about Jacksonville with their roster is you really don't know how good they can be because it's a very fluid thing right now. I mean, you've seen them at their worst but they're also evolving into something. And so you don't know, is this really what they are? Or on Saturday, are they even better than what they were in the second half against the Chargers or in that 5-game win streak? I mean, it's like that's kind of what happened with the Bengals last year. You didn't really take them seriously. Then all of a sudden you looked up and they were the AFC champions because you didn't want to believe that a team that could be that bad for that long with that number of players that you didn't really know that well. I mean, aside from, Joe Burrow was a second-year guy, Jamar Chase was a rookie. They didn't have a lot of household names. And then all of a sudden they got really good really fast. And so I think if you took out Chris Jones and Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes, yeah, I mean, the rosters are pretty comparable. I think their front seven is pretty feisty, even though they don't have huge sack numbers. I think they've got athleticism and speed in their front seven, which is an interesting thing to bring to the table in a game like this. Again, the Chiefs are the better team, and that is undeniable. But after the way last weekend went and the way last year's playoffs went, especially in this round, I just think I'm anticipating a much closer game than I think the betting lines would have you believe.
I'm not. I will yet again.
That's your MO.
What I do.
When are you not betting a blowout?
Leopard changes spots? No. No, not now. And I will lay the points on this one and probably parlay it up with the other 3 games on the money line because this one, we were talking about some bets that we made, and I money lined all 6 games and had a 16 parlay that I hit. You had 4 favorites, 2 dogs. It wasn't that I didn't split an atom, right? Eric can confirm the math. It wasn't that big a deal, but it was still a nice little payday. But the thing I think in this game though. We can talk about taking the quarterbacks out. Let's talk about the quarterbacks. The difference between the two, Eric, is vast, right? So, like, even if, and I think, when Jeff says, well, Chris Jones, like, I don't see a playmaker yet on the defensive side for the Jags, the caliber of Chris Jones. So the best playmaker on each side of the ball belongs to the Kansas City Chiefs. That's a pretty good place to start. Now, I think you've said many times, defense is a no weakness thing. So if the Chiefs have a big hole and the Jags can exploit it, great. I don't think they have a big hole. Right. And we'll get to the secondary in a little bit. I know Jeff's got some thoughts on that, but the quarterbacks are going to play, and the difference between the two quarterbacks is prohibitive. And even in the comeback, first of all, the burying of the Jags in the first half, even in the comeback, he hit high school wide open guys for the big plays. The rest of the time, I couldn't believe the Chargers weren't sitting on some of the short routes. I actually think Brandon Staley's head was in his sphincter. I don't know what the hell he was doing because they were jumping routes early, and then they quit doing that and kind of just let the Jags back in. To your original point, I think, it was all about the Jags. I don't know. The Chargers did a pretty good job of laying down.
Is that for me?
No, I was Eric. I was going to say.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, the Chargers.
Isn't the quarterback difference prohibitive? Because it's not like Trevor Lawrence went out there and looked like Kurt Warner versus, Aaron Rodgers in that great playoff game from like 10 years ago.
I'll say this, though. At least he throws the ball past the sticks.
Sometimes
Eric's got like a hard on for Justin Herbert. That is like quarter on. Like if Justin Herbert played in Jacksonville, Eric would be talking him up like the next Andrew Luck.
I think that one's directed at his other hard on, Kirk Cousins, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I have Giants fans. One of my best friends, my brother-in-law, went to the game. Giants fan. I said, look, I know you wanted Slayton to catch that cross, but I needed him to drop it so that Kirk should throw the ball short of the sticks on 4th and 8. I needed that. I needed that one time. Otherwise, a good game by Mr. Cousins in a loss. But no, I mean, Lawrence is better than Herbert. That's one thing. At least he'll go downfield. At least he's the author of his own football life. But he's not as good as Mahomes, and the difference is drastic. And Jeff, I know this kills you because, your big thing is the Chiefs have a great quarterback and the rest of the roster is just kind of whatever. But this is the one matchup where they are better across the roster. Better offensive line, maybe not as good at receivers for sure. Better tight end, of course. Better defensive line, better linebackers, better secondary. The Chiefs are better all over the place. And the only reason the Jags have a chance in this game.
Can we think their linebackers are better?
Yeah, of course.
Aluakon's pretty good linebacker.
Look, my boss drafted Foye Aluakon, so I got to be a little bit. Shy here. Devin Lloyd and Foye Aluakon are just names. And Willie Gay and Nick Bolton are better players than those two. But the
I thought Willie got
secondary
the league in tackles, didn't he?
That is not
as a minor thing.
That is not a good thing. That is not a good thing.
But a linebacker leads the league in tackles?
No, and it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing that I'm drawing a blank on the Chiefs, Nick Bolton. It's not a good thing that Bolton was second. That means your ass is on the field all day. It means you can't get the other team off the field.
Yeah, you can't get off the
field.
field.
Records that were broken. Yeah, the breaking the Chiefs single season tackle record, you went by names like Gary Spaney, Mike Maslowski, and Derek Johnson.
Mike Maslowski, by the way, UW lacrosse legend.
I know, but these were the worst defenses the Chiefs have ever hatched. You can't get any. If you can't get off the field, you get a lot of tackles.
Have you watched the Littleton play?
I will jump that all day.
I'm saying the Chiefs roster is better than the Jaguars roster. The only reason the Jags have a chance in this game is because their coach and their quarterback have high-end potential. That's it. And that is why, whereas, for other teams, like when they face Buffalo or Cincinnati, you can make a case that Buffalo or Cincinnati, even with their injuries, have better rosters than the Chiefs outside of quarterback. This is not the case today. The only reason that the Jags are in the position that they're in and that they have a chance in this game is because Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence are no joke. That is the only reason that they're in it, that they have a chance.
Yeah.
And so they're playing all the positions too. Is that what you're saying? Because I think you have to have some talent.
Pat plays all the Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Juju Smith-Schuster, Sky Moore, Kadarius
Those guys
Toney,
aren't better than the Jags for
and Justin
those
Watson. Pat plays all the positions for the Chiefs.
You will not ever get me to buy into that. If just those two letters MVS coming out of your mouth, but that's ridiculous.
I'm saying it derogatorily. Pat plays all the position. Pat is the entire vehicle for the Chiefs. He's the whole car and the driver.
That was the point I was making. I'm saying those three guys swing it for the Chiefs, but the other guys, I would say,
what I'm saying is the reason Lawrence has a chance on Sunday, the Jags, is because Lawrence is a poor man's Mahomes, and if you can get like the high end, he can lift that whole roster up. That's the only reason they're in the position they are right now, right? Is because Lawrence and Peterson can drive the whole car, right?
Collectively, the wide receivers of the Kansas City Chiefs, according to PFF, are better, but not by a whole lot.
Based on what?
Based on their grades, I'm just looking at it. I mean, the three that qualified for the grades for the Chargers, Christian Kirk 30th, Zay Jones 68th, and Marvin Jones 103rd. For the Kansas City Chiefs, their qualifying wide receivers ranked Sky Moore 40th, Juju Smith-Schuster 42, McCole Hardman 59. I doubt he's going to play. Marquez 94th, and Justin Watson 118. But the top three are 40, 42, and 59. There's no 100.
And so stat-wise.
No, that's grade-wise. That's not stat-wise. That's grade-wise. Listen, I'm with you. I like Christian Kirk a lot. I wanted the Chiefs to sign him when I thought he could be had for about $10 million a year, but I thought you'd overpay at 10 and get him, and instead he went for $72 million over 4. I mean, I didn't see it coming, but kudos to the Jags. They got weapons for their young guy. It was a smart play. I mean, they overpaid for him, but he's playing well. And they'll probably end up renegotiating the deal if they win and tweaking it around and moving some money around over the long haul. But it was a good signing for them, even though it was pretty expensive. By the way, we're brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the entire KC Metro. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, KC's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in KC since '94. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Tell them you heard about them here at the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Jeff, the bye week. Andy Reid, at one point, had never lost, I think, after the bye week. He's had a loss now, but how significant is this for him? Eric said earlier, it's a point in the betting markets. How significant is it for you as far as the matchup in this game?
Well, I think it's especially important given that he's going up against a coach who's worked on his staff and been his right-hand man for a long time. I mean, Andy Reid is exceptional at, preparation, scheming, getting creative. You give him 2 weeks to look at anybody, he's going to come up with a lot of stuff. And I think that matters in a game like this. And again, it goes back to why this is a better matchup, because I think with the Chargers, they're a lot more familiar with what the Chiefs do, and there's only so much stuff you can come up that they haven't seen you try. And with the Jaguars, it's a different story. And so, yeah, I expect them to have a few wrinkles in it the Jaguars didn't see the first time around. I think the Jaguars being more of a zone-heavy team that allows Andy to be even more creative in what he wants to do. And so, yeah, I think that's going to be a big factor in this game. Just him being able to be consistent with that theme of coming out, having his team ready to go, and just really taking off in a hurry.
It's a point on average, Eric. Is it even more important, though, for the Chiefs?
Oh, yeah. And I think it also compounds with what you just talked about with Hardman. Like, Hardman's the only, like, injured player on this team that matters, right? Like, look at offensive line. Like, they have, Tooney's gotten a little bit healthier, having being banged up and missed some games. Even like at backup right tackle, Lucas Niang, we're seeing him suit up and play some now. Like, they have depth on the offensive line. They'd never have to play your guy, Darian Kennard, ever in the playoffs now because of that, which is great. Defensive line, I saw Frank, was sick again. I don't know. The last time he was sick, it was Skyline Chili. This time, who knows? Maybe it was it wasn't Joe's. I know that they sponsor the program, but linebacker, they're healthy again. Willie Gay has had his first healthy season in the NFL. And in the secondary, you got L'Jarius Sneed a little bit banged up in the Denver game. Of course, now a couple weeks off. Like, McCole Hardman's the only injured player on the Chiefs that matters. And that you look across the key here, Elam got injured for the Bills. Von Miller's already out for the season there. The Jonah Williams is out for the season. The right tackle, Lyle Collins for Cincinnati's out for the season. The Alex Kappa, the right guard's out, right? You look, and the Chiefs, like, the bye, and I know Chiefs fans got angry at me for saying that they got a good shake out of this. The bye means you don't have to slug it out and lose Jonah Williams against a bad Ravens team last week. And so, it matters a lot. It matters in all honesty, it's why you lay the points with the Chiefs. Because I don't think it doesn't matter necessarily in the game outcomes. It matters in who the Chiefs are, which is a healthy team that is rested up and hasn't had necessarily every game's been must win for them down the stretch, but it hasn't been as bad as it has been for teams like Cincinnati, especially, and even Buffalo.
Yeah, I would agree. And listen, I think the chance to get healthy, although it is amazing that McCole Hardman, I mean, I don't know what's gone on there, but to be on the brink of coming back now for like 5 weeks and they're not practicing him again, somebody screwed something up. Let's just say that for the vaunted, always, every team loves to compliment their medical staff. Somebody screwed something up here because they're a long way into him practicing and he's still now not practicing because they're going to calm it down. Why were you revving it up so fast in the first place? So I do think that's a little bit interesting because that's one where you thought, okay, they're going to have everybody. I think everyone's dreaming about Kadarius Toney and McCole Hardman being out there together. Also, there's been a lot of comments about Nick Bolton, like somehow we're running down Nick Bolton. We're not running down Nick Bolton. The point is this. Listen, Gary Spaney, Mike Maslowski, and Derek Johnson are all good players, and so is Nick Bolton. The point is when you set tackle records and when you lead the league in tackles, you're usually playing on a bad defense. That's why I say let's not get too excited about that number. Let's talk about the MVP, Jeff. We haven't had you had the stat. Is this right? The MVP hasn't won the Super Bowl since
Kurt Warner.
Yeah,
Kurt Warner. That's amazing. Does that change this time around?
No, it stays true to form. I mean, I got the Bills winning it all, and so I think as great as Mahomes has been this year, I think we can all agree that he's had to carry this team that for certain stretches, and usually that is what happens with MVPs now. You get credit for the things you have to do to help your team play at a high level. And, and usually I think because it's become such a quarterback-driven award, aside from Adrian Peterson, and there's one other running back who's won it in the last 23 years. I can't remember who it was now. It basically amounts to quarterbacks putting up huge numbers. And that to me isn't an accurate assessment of what a team can do. And I know it's a quarterback-driven league, but it's still a team game. And the teams that end up winning championships generally are good all the way around, from offense to defense to special teams. So as good as Mahomes has been, And I think he'll probably be a unanimous MVP. I don't even know if that's going to be in question now. I think there are other issues on this team. Somebody mentioned the kicking game that can still doom them, in a winner in a one game, winner go home format.
Jeff, how much of it is because, we've talked about it, that it's not about, when we would talk about this in the awards, he would be kind of changing hands beforehand. We said it's not necessarily about who deserves it. Like Eric was always like, he deserves it. I definitely agree. I think you agree as well. It was at those times, the storyline, the people who were going to vote. How much of it is that the people who vote on it are playing their games like, well, he's got lots of chances to win it in the future, and they're not giving it to necessarily the right guy, and hence that's why it's not lining up with who's most valuable.
Yeah, I mean that's part of it. I mean, but you go back and look at who's won it over the last few years. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, obviously they had a really good team, but special teams was an issue for them. You go back, you look at Matt Ryan when he won it, they had a really good team, but couldn't close out the Patriots when they had the opportunity. I hear what you're saying in terms of how people win it. And if you're asking me if Mahomes deserves more opportunities or deserve more up until now, I don't think that's the case. I think the numbers bear it out this year and they bore it out in 2018. But the larger point I'm making about just how a team wins versus how a quarterback wins. Sometimes we talk about Mahomes or the offense like that's the only thing that matters. And I know sometimes people say, well, they got the number one offense. Well, they got the best quarterback. Well, again, that's great, but that's not going to carry you to a championship. If it was, Aaron Rodgers would have 10 trophies. Peyton Manning would have 10 trophies.
Tom Brady has 7, though. I mean,
and he played on teams with great defenses and great special teams.
Yeah, but I think with Rodgers, that could be the indictment of they're voting on the wrong thing. That Rodgers is a stat hound and not the great player, right? Like,
fellas, let's just back this thing up, okay? The reason is because for the most part, the MVP goes.
The other one is small sample size, and it could be total coincidence.
And I just made this calculation. Let's assume that the favorite to win the Super Bowl has a 17.5% chance. It's roughly going in, right? And so assume that the MVP plays quarterback for the favorite. That actually isn't the case. When Adrian Peterson won it for the Vikings in 2012, the Vikings were the 6th seed with Christian Ponder, the underdogs in early on. But let's assume every single MVP, it's a 1.5% chance. Like if you take 0.825 to the 22nd power, it's about 1.4%. So it's just a small sample. Like we're talking about the fact that even the favorite right now, like I just talk glowingly about the Chiefs and how everything's setting up really nicely for them. And I kind of agree with the market that says they have a 22% chance of winning the Super Bowl. It is hard to win the Super Bowl. You need to parlay, to Petro's point, you need to basically money line parlay 3 -250s in a row at best, at very best. And that's, if you get the best of it. That's if you get Houston, Tennessee, San Fran. In many cases, it's even harder. So the reason that the MVP hasn't won the Super Bowl is nothing fundamental about it. It's just that the favorite doesn't win the Super Bowl very often.
Yeah, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the MVP plays for the favorite.
That makes it even more drastic, right? Right.
Yeah, I get it. I get what you're saying, but the point still is, in this case, the Chiefs are the favorite, and he does play for them.
Correct, but the favorite is still a 1 in 5 chance of winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah, 1 in 4, 1 in 5 chance. Yeah, absolutely. By the way, Tommy said I said there'd be no math in the podcast. What power did we go to?
22nd, right?
Okay. The 22nd power. Good to know. That's great. Eric Eager, living abacus. There it is. Everybody likes it. Math peaked in junior high. Wasn't much of a peak, though. I love that from Temecula. Look, I don't think there's a correlation like, oh, you have the MVP, you don't win. There's clearly no correlation to that. I think it is mostly anomaly as to why it is. What about the winning of close games, right? I know Eric has pointed out many times, Jeff, that, good teams win most games by a lot. They go 50-50 in the close games, but they, win 8 out of 10 by a lot. And then they play 6 close games, go 3-3, and they're, an 11. They're sitting at 11-5 with 2 games to go. What do you make of the Chiefs winning close games down the stretch?
I think it matters. I've said this consistently that if you win games in this league, you've done a good thing. And so I'll never uh, minimize a win or or say that a team that won didn't achieve something. Now, I think the question with the Chiefs is the red flags that have come out of some of those wins, the kicking game, the turnovers, the pass defense against more high-powered teams. That's the bigger question. But I think, Mahomes spoke to this earlier earlier this last week, whenever it was. And I think there's something to be said for especially young players proving that they know how to fight and know how to compete and know how to make plays when games are in critical situations. I don't care if you're playing against the Denver Broncos or the Buffalo Bills. If you're finding ways to make those plays, I think it helps. Now, but again, I think ultimately the Chiefs are always an interesting story or an intriguing topic to talk about when it comes to this because their standard is so high. And so when you are playing close games against teams that you should be unleashing the fury on, to use your phrase, it does lead to more questions. Because I think a majority of Chiefs fans expect what they were back in 2018, 2019, when it was, okay, they're beating teams 41 to 20. And more realistically is what happens these days. And even, look, Buffalo was favored to beat the Miami Dolphins by, I'm sure, a double-digit line last week. The Bengals, I'm sure, were heavily favored to beat the Ravens. And those games came down to one-possession games that could have gone either way in the end. And that's just life in the NFL. So I do think it helps them. I think it helps their young players. And it will be beneficial for them to have had those experiences at this time of year.
Eric, what do the close games say to you? Is this a battle-tested team that knows how to win the close ones, or no, there's too many close calls and they're playing with fire?
Well, I think the number of close games you play in is more fundamental than their outcome. So I think that them being close with Denver is not as good as them pulling the games out, if that makes sense. And so I'm coming over a little bit to Jeff's side on that one. But it's a long season. You're not going to always have your A game. They've won close games against some great, really good teams. They lost close games. Like, again, being in close games with the Bills of the world and the Bengals of the world, and the aforementioned Chargers, like, that matters as well in the positive sense. So I would say, close games are not necessarily, they're not a mark of a champion, but they're also when you lose close games to great teams, like, I think that there's some decent fundamentals in that as well.
Yeah. Listen, I think you're going to have to play close games. I think you're going to have to play with mistakes. Like, that's the one thing that we've seen.
Yeah.
Josh Allen's throwing INTs. Like, the other team can play too. And so you're not likely to have that perfect game out of everybody that's out there. So I think that's a part of it. Speaking of problems, is the kicking game fixed, Jeff? Are you confident that if it comes down to that the Chiefs can execute? Certainly at least better than the Cowboys. We'll start there. But did the Raider game tell you, and did an extra week of practice, should that instill people with confidence that they ought to have the kicking game fixed?
Yeah, it's like there's COVID going through the kickers in the NFL right now. Everybody's catching the misses now.
Yeah.
I don't know. I am not confident in it. And I think it goes back to what I've said a couple of weeks or maybe 3 weeks ago, that at some point it's just who you are. And while you may have games where you don't have those issues, when you ratchet up the intensity, when there's more higher consequences attached to what happens, I'm not so certain that human nature doesn't kick in and you go back to things that aren't helpful. I think it's a flawed operation. And I think Adam Teicher had made this point earlier, maybe a few weeks back himself, talking about Lynn Elliott having issues back in that season. That was, the Chiefs' worst nightmare. And then all of a sudden they were like, it's gotten better towards the end of the year. He's straightened out. And they got into a game against the Colts and it all went to shit,
Yeah.
And so do I think Harrison Butker is going to miss an important kick in this playoffs? Yeah. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I feel like there's going to be a gaffe there and maybe even a fumble on a special teams play. I just think that it's just been part of their story throughout the season. And those things often don't change when the games get tougher.
Eric, your confidence in the kicking game?
Not high. I mean, if I see one kickoff returned out of the end zone, I'm gonna start firing off some text messages. I'll just say that. Like and Bucker, I'm more confident in Bucker from 55 than I am from like 35.
Yeah, I would agree, and I do think that one of the things they're going to have to do is certainly try to avoid needing the kick to win it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the real question here is, are they going to, is Andy Reid gonna coach like he has to, like what this team is, or is he gonna coach to build their confidence next week? I hope that it's not a matter of, what's it gonna say to my defense if I go for it on fourth down? Like if you get a missed extra point or get a missed field goal, then you got to say, we need touchdowns, right? I need 6 each time. And that's the question. Will Andy Reid flip that switch? I mean, can any coach just flip that switch, Jeff? Like, I think that's one of the real questions is, will he coach to what his team actually is, not what he wants it to be, and not diapering their psyche?
I think Andy Reid is incredibly loyal to his players. I think he has a high amount of confidence in them doing what he thinks they can do. And that sometimes can be to his detriment. And same thing with his coaches, for that matter. And so I think he will believe in Harrison Butker and expect him to do what he can do, not what he's been doing. And the problem with that is, again, as great as the Chiefs have been this year offensively, they are not as explosive as they were 3 years ago. You watch the Buffalo Bills play, you can see they don't have that level of explosiveness in them on a regular basis. And so when you are losing those opportunities to score, a field goal here and a missed extra point there, the opportunities to get that back are not what they used to be. And so, yeah, you're right. I mean, Andy needs to adjust to that. But I still think he believes Harrison Butker is a weapon and a player who can be trusted. And if I were him, I'd be like Mike McCarthy last night after Maher missed all those extra points. Like, he ain't going back out there. Like if it comes down to 4th and 4 and we're in our, plus 50 and it's we got a chance to kick or a 55-yard field goal or going for it, you better go for it.
I think that's one of the big questions. Where's your confidence level on how Andy Reid, whether or not he'll press the right buttons? Like we had this kind of discussion about clock management versus game management. And I think there is a difference. I mean, I think they manage the clock brilliantly because I think they have Patrick Mahomes. I think that's what makes it easy. Sam McDowell and I from the Kansas City Star argued about this. But the game management part, Sam pointed out some things that Andy's still lacking. And I think one of them is not being honest with yourself about what the hell you have. Like, he didn't get it right on letting the Bengals score. That's a worst case scenario. That's not something you plan for. You end up in that situation, right? So once you get there, you're almost all is lost anyway. So that's not the biggest deal. But are there times where, like, hey, maybe it's not the fullback dive on every 4th and 1. Let's call some real plays. Like maybe it's not, time to just go ahead and run Butker out there. I mean, that's part of the coaching as well, Eric. And where's the confidence that he'll get that part of it right?
Yeah, I think, and I think the missed part, and when you guys were arguing, is the fact that like when they're on offense, they do a really good job. When they're on defense, like we've seen before, where like the timeout usage has been a little bit dicey at times. But I think Reid, along with Mahomes, when they have the football, will get it right. We saw it against Buffalo last year. Where I get worried is on the defensive side of the ball when the other coach maybe has prepared a little bit more for the situation than they have.
Yeah. How about Doug Peterson? Who do you give the advantage to, Peterson or Andy Reid, Jeff?
Well, you give it to Reid just because he's the more accomplished coach, but Doug Peterson has impressed the hell out of me with the way he's coached this season. In some ways, it's probably a better job than he did with those Eagles teams when he won a championship. And I know he lost his starting quarterback back then and took Nick Foles and got it done. But, this team was 3-7 when they played the Chiefs last time. And they were going nowhere in a hurry. And somehow he got them to believe and to buy in. And when you look at the way they played in the second half of that game against the Chargers, I was still baffled by how they pulled that out. without getting a turnover. I mean, it's like, I'm not the math guy here, but I would imagine the odds of you making that kind of comeback without a team giving you the ball once is pretty hard to do. And so I thought he was very astute when he went up tempo in the second half. And when the Chargers were having all those short drives, it really tired their defense out, having to come back out. I thought he stayed with the run game when you're thinking they're going to be passing the ball like crazy to get back into it. The conversion, the 2-point conversion when Bosa gave him that big penalty, he wasn't going for that until they gave him the opportunity. And I think even going for it to put themselves in position to win, knowing that we don't want to be in overtime. We fought our way back here. Let's get it done. Again, I go back to come back against the Ravens, come back against the Chargers, and then beating the Cowboys and beating the Titans on 2 game-winning defensive plays. He's got that whole, not just the quarterback, that whole team believes in what he's doing. And so I give him a ton of credit for that.
He's definitely a very competent coach and knows what he's doing. Does he have an advantage? Who gets student or teacher, or is it just about who's the better coach? Is there any built-in edge here for one side or the other, Eric?
Oh, Andy's a little bit better. I think play calling, but Peterson knows when to press the game management edge. The problem is like, the difference between, we saw it last time, the difference between Reid and Peterson in the middle 95% of the game is going to keep most of the games from being close enough where Peterson's game management stuff actually matters. So that's the rub there, right? So I think, Reid has the advantage, but I think the longer the game goes, and the closer the game is, Reid's advantage withers, right? And it becomes a game about management of clock and timeouts and fourth downs and 2-point conversions. And that's not where Reid shines relative to Peterson.
Yeah. I think, my hope is that he'll just be honest with what he's got. And I think if he's honest with the fact that, like, hey, this isn't working and I'm going to have to, boost some egos later because we're trying to win a championship here. I get it somewhat when you say, okay, the big picture in season is to keep trying to build up my team, and that's going to do us more good on down the road. It's now time to make it happen. And building up Steve Spagnuolo's confidence or his defense's confidence, that can't be done now. If he's looking at it going, we haven't stopped these guys all day, wherever that may be from here on out, he's got to stay with the money man. Well, that's Patrick Mahomes, and you've got to make it happen there. That's where it is. And I think everybody would be much more accepting of, well, he went with Patrick Mahomes. And I think the team would be much more accepting of it. Like, how can it be a fault to give it to the best player on the team? I don't know. That to me is where my fear is, that he punts with 2:24 to go and 1 timeout in a playoff game where, he's counting on the defense to get a 3 and out, and he never puts his quarterback back out on the field. The young players, are they ready, Jeff, to get it done? Does that secondary scare you? Still, Nick Bolton's not a rookie, but he's a second-year player. Where's your confidence in the youth that the Chiefs have injected this year?
It doesn't scare me in this game, and I do think that they have played better as the season has gone along. Karlaftis has made, he's got 6 sacks or something like that. I think Trent McDuffie has shown some encouraging signs. The other 2 rookies, they've been okay. They haven't been phenomenal, but I think that there is, again, a lot of optimism about what they can be, but different stage here. I'm curious to see how Jacksonville attacks them. Doug Peterson is a very smart coach. I have a feeling Travis Etienne is going to play a bigger role in this game than he did in the first game. That game kind of got away from them, and he wasn't as much of a factor. I think he might have been hurt a little bit too, if I remember correctly, in that game. But I think he has got some potential to do some damage. But ultimately, this is what they're here for. And I think Justin Reid said it best, that these guys aren't rookies anymore. You played long enough. You've gotten through the grind of it. You were brought here to be difference makers. Time to become difference makers. And it's just, to me, I don't think Jacksonville has the weapons on the outside to really challenge them in the way that Buffalo can or Cincinnati can. And so that's, I think, the saving grace here. You won't get that much exposure to harm with what those guys can be. But if they're seeing Buffalo next week, which I expect them to see Buffalo next week, it's going to be a big challenge for those guys to make plays.
Erica, how much are you concerned with the youth?
Not. I mean, I think that now they've played Buffalo. They've played the Chargers twice. They've played Cincinnati. We saw Joshua Williams get abused by the Bills. We've seen, we've seen, the mistakes against Cincinnati. They're a year in, and it's different, right? In 2018, Trevarius Ward was playing, like in the AFC title game. He was playing, it was like fifth game as a starter. Tremont Smith was playing, he was playing snaps for like the second time all year. I think that once they play, like they've gotten snaps all year. And so like by this time, they're not really rookies anymore. So I don't foresee it being that big of a deal. I think that their athleticism is going to be more of a big deal than their youth.
Yeah, I do too. I like the speed that's out there. They hopefully aren't going to get beat on any just total mistakes. And I'm looking at the depth chart here of the team that went out and played in the Super Bowl and won the Super Bowl in 2019. And I'll take the talent this year over what it was that year. I mean, I think it's a more talented team. I think the most important pieces, Patrick Mahomes is more experienced and I think more patient. Chris Jones is still Chris Jones. He had the exact same sack total this year. So I think their biggest pieces are still in place.
You think this team is more talented? Is that what you said?
Yes, the 19, yes. I'm looking at the depth chart, yes. I mean,
without Tyreek Hill.
Tyreek Hill is the one big thing.
Or Tyrann Mathieu at a Pro Bowl level.
Tyrann Mathieu, I think, is a creation of the media and everything they loved about him. I think he's a fine player. I think he was.
Petro, just stop short and just say L'Jarius Sneed is that kind of player now.
Yeah, I mean,
like that's what I mean. Like you don't have to degrade Tyrann Mathieu, but like the L'Jarius Sneed is what Tyrann Mathieu is to that defense. Yeah. Well, and you look.
How about this? How about L'Jarius Sneed and I think the corner.
Rashad Breeland and Trevarius Ward are worse than what they have on the outside now. Sneed. I mean, Sneed is better. The combination of Justin Reid, L'Jarius Sneed, and Juan Thornhill.
That's who I was trying to. Trent McDuffie and L'Jarius Sneed are better than any corner that played.
They were playing Kendall Fuller at free safety in that Super Bowl run because Juan Thornhill had torn his ACL.
And Dan Sorensen played,
and Anthony Hitchens.
That game.
Anthony
that
Hitchens
is a shit show.
Tyrann Mathieu was an All-Pro safety.
Anthony Hitchens started. Anthony Hitchens, Ben Neiman, and Damian Wilson were the linebackers for that team. Come on, man.
Yeah.
The linebackers are definitively
I think Willie Gay. I think you're overrating Willie Gay.
I disagree.
I think Willie Gay is better.
You don't have to overrate him. Anthony Hitchens was not good. Damian Wilson was not good.
This version of Frank Clark is better than that version of Frank Clark if we want to get that far. And Alex Okafor, who was starting? Was it Alex?
Defensive end.
Tyreek Hill counts as two
receivers. Not as good as Karlaftis.
Listen, the interior line was Wisniewski, Reeder, and LDT. The tackles were better.
LDT was a privilege at that point of his career.
Yeah, the tackles were better. Yeah,
the tackles were better. But the offensive line, I think, was comparable. Because they were not good.
Pacheco and Eric Fisher and
Pacheco. Hey, look, I got to eat some crow here. Pacheco and McKinnon are better than Damian Williams.
Running backs are better. The tight end's the same guy.
Let me see what Damian.
Noah Gray is fifth on this team in receptions. Noah Gray is way better than the second tight end they had back then.
And Blake Bell was the second tight end then. And he's still here.
And the wide receiver depth. Like, my God, Sammy Watkins was on his JD Drew run. And we act like Sammy Watkins is a ton better than Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He is not
any better. Right? He's the same guy.
He's the
same freaking guy.
You take MBS, Sky Moore, and whoever else you want to throw in there. I'll take Tyreek Hill over those three.
I will take Tyreek Hill over Juju, but MBS and Sammy Watkins are no different. Travis Kelce is the same guy, and the rest of the wideouts.
Marcus Robinson is not as good as whoever the third receiver is on this team on that day.
DeMarcus Robinson.
I'd take DeMarcus Robinson over MVS right now. You see that touchdown catch he had against the Bengals?
Oh my God! You mean the one where they forgot to cover him?
Yeah.
DeMarcus Robinson
how was the kicking game?
More in
how
that
was the
game.
special teams?
DeMarcus Robinson did more in that game for the Chiefs.
Okay.
In that game, DeMarcus Robinson did more for the Chiefs' playoff hopes than he did in 5 years for the Chiefs. In that game for the Ravens when he almost knocked off the Bengals. That was the most DeMarcus Robinson has ever done for this team in the playoffs.
Yeah.
We talk about MVS's hands. DeMarcus Robinson's hands were the reason they were down 24-0 to the Texans in that game.
Okay, so you guys are picking this team to win a Super Bowl then.
No, this team may not win because the Bills are definitively better than the 49ers were then.
Oh, okay.
This year's 49ers are better. This year's Eagles are probably better than the Niners. The Bengals are better than the Niners were. They didn't have to play the Ravens, who they'd already beaten, but they got a Titans team that's one-dimensional and can only run the ball. There's no doubt that season, as many seasons, there was a bit of a charmed run. And you don't always win. It's like Eric calls them stolen championships. The Chiefs are maybe the favorite, but this is the Bills championship in my mind. Anybody else wins it, they stole it from the Bills.
I agree.
Bills are the team that should go out there and get it done. Regardless of where they had to play playoff-wise, they're the team that should get it done. And I don't think they're any kind of lock to do it. I think this Chiefs team is better, but I think the competition around them is better. But they're plenty good, just as they were good enough, even with their ass defense in 18, to get it done. If they're not offsides, they beat the Rams in the Super Bowl. I believe that with all my heart and soul.
They beat the Rams both times. Last year, they would have dick kicked the Rams. I'm sorry. Sorry. I'm walking around
the logic
LA
there.
all
I don't
last year.
understand how they lose to the Bengals, but they would beat the Rams.
I'm looking at pictures of Trey Hendrickson and Joe Burrow, just pissed that the Chiefs would have absolutely murdered that Rams team.
Jeff, by that, first of all, styles make fights. By that logic, any team that wins the first game of a divisional matchup is automatically got to win the second game.
Look.
By that logic, the Bills shouldn't have been in the playoffs because they lost to the Jags last year, who had the number one pick. They lost to the worst team in football. Come on. You can't just look at one game and say, therefore, that team is better than every other. The transitive property does not work in sports.
Yeah, the point I make is that when teams have a chance to win and they don't, I don't give them credit for being able to beat somebody else because they couldn't get there.
You're right, Jeff.
That's
fine.
Legs fly forever, but the Chiefs would have absolutely mollywopped the Jared Goff Rams, and they absolutely
They played that team.
I know, and Goff went from Joe Montana in the middle of that year to the biggest crib I've ever seen in the Super Bowl.
Do you really you remember that game? Do you remember how many fluky turnovers there were that bounced right up into somebody's hands for touchdowns?
51 Rams.
And do you remember that the Rams managed 3 points against a Patriot team that the Chiefs hung 31 points in one half on? And
I remember the Chiefs losing to the Patriots.
Two teams
that had a chance to be there.
At the end of that season, you're telling me the Rams were playing better football than the Chiefs were at the end of the 18th season?
Yeah, because they went and beat a Saints team that was supposed to win the NFC in New Orleans.
Okay.
Do you remember that part?
Drew Brees, Jeff, I've seen your arms. You can throw the ball further than Drew Brees could in 18, 19, and 20. Like that by the time the season was over, the Drew Brees was drawing so dead at throwing the football.
And that Saints game, that's the one with the jackass personal foul or pass interference penalty. And the Saints should have won it. I mean, the Rams were not playing
went to
well.
Overtime too, right?
The Rams were not playing well.
They still played football after that play.
What was the key to the Rams' offense during their run of success?
Todd Gurley.
And how was Todd Gurley at that point in the year?
No, he was banged up.
He was backing up
ass.
CJ Anderson.
It was terrible. It was terrible. They lost the engine that drove the car. Had the Chiefs backing up, had anybody from the AFC gotten there, they would have beaten the Rams.
I wouldn't go that far. What was the score of that game?
13-3.
13-3, that's right. The
Rams 6-3 Patriots, and an by the way, touchdown made it 13-3.
I don't know.
So
good thing they play the games. We don't have to argue this. We know what history told us.
They do play the games, but that outcome is not an outcome that, hey, if you played it 10 times, it'd be 10 times that way.
I never understand the point of this exercise. Like, if they play the game, and you know who's in the game, so it doesn't matter what you think could have happened. What happened.
If you don't understand this exercise, let's get to our predictions. Yeah. Jeff, you've got the Chiefs by 10, right? Because they played earlier this year, and the Chiefs won by 10. So you've got the Chiefs by 10 points, correct?
I got them by 4.
Oh, wow. Jeff, they played earlier this year.
I haven't won it. I don't have them losing. I haven't won it.
Okay. Do you at least hear the flaw now?
I understand what you're saying, but you can create anybody. You can make anybody a better team based on any set of circumstances. But when they play, we know who's better. That's how I rank them.
Okay.
The Bills and the
And
Chiefs,
listen,
the Bills and the Bengals played the Chiefs this year. To me, those are better teams because they played and they both beat the Chiefs.
and I will tell you this, that is a winner mentality because it's the loser's lament to say, well, if we had that's a slappy loser mentality. There's no doubt. I get it. But once we go down that road and we're going to have the discussion, then they just weren't better. All right, Eric. So Jeff, you got him. What was the score?
28-24.
28-24 Chiefs. Okay. Eric?
30-20 goes under. Chiefs cover.
I'll go 33-16 Chiefs. 30
Under.
33-16.
He likes under too.
I don't if I'd known the under, I actually think it could get towards the over because I actually think the Chiefs are going to roll. I think they're going to start putting up numbers. And I think defensively they're playing better now than they were then. And I think that's going to be a problem. And I think Jacksonville, who you saw how they reacted to their first playoff game. Let's see how they react after having had played a playoff game, getting into a playoff. I still don't think they're ready for prime time. I know the Bengals did it. First of all, I don't think Trevor Lawrence is as good as Joe Burrow. And I think for a lot of reasons, this one gets out of hand. And there it is. Soren with the kiss of death. They have been winning all those games that I said they're going to rout.
Is this how you gamble? You just keep making the same bet over and over until it actually hits, and then you say, look how smart I am.
Listen, I'm paid to have opinions. I'm not paid to make bets. So just because I have an opinion doesn't mean I bet on it. But I'll be on the Chiefs. I'll be on the Chiefs minus the points. I'll probably parlay them up, with some other things just to win it. I'll probably dig into some of the props. And I like I said, I think Mahomes is gonna have a day. I think Mahomes is ready to come out and I validate the MVP. I think you're gonna look at one motivated individual who's motivated to win and not just post stats. And I think he's gonna play well. That's what I think. We'll see if we're right. We want to thank everybody for joining us here. Of course, we want to thank our fine sponsor, Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. If you got any problems with your parking lot, call 816-484-3338. Every project comes with a written warranty, no commissions, in-house crews, and free consultations. You get all that with Gann Asphalt and Concrete, solving parking problems since 1994. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. That's GannAsphalt.com. For Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on Red, Gold, and Bold.